creatures of the earth and sky. Come, kindred, lift your voices high. Alleluia, alleluia. Bright burning sun with golden beam, soft shining moon with silver gleam. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Swift rushing wind so wild and strong, white clouds that sail in heaven along. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Fair rising morn in praise rejoice. High stars of evening find a voice. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe truth is larger than any one book or way. Religion and science, they go hand in hand. Integrity requires freedom of conscience. Diversity is something to celebrate. In the struggle for justice, we come alive. Our highest aspiration and calling is love. Cool flowing water, pure and clear, make music for all life to hear. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Dance, flame of fire so strong and bright, and bless us with your warmth and light. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your path is in this world, you are welcome here. When we say all creatures of the earth and sky, at least this morning, we mean that. All creatures of the earth and sky, whatever world we're talking about. And we light our chalice this morning with curiosity, with a spirit wanting to kindle a spirit of curiosity, a spirit of wonder, as we take that into a very strange topic this morning. Curiosity and wonder. We light our chalice today in that spirit. Well, good morning, West Shore. Best place to be on a Sunday morning. I bet you no other church in Cleveland is talking about UFOs this morning. Come on. And we're talking about it as Unitarian Universalists with a religious context. So we'll see where that goes. Once again, welcome here. I want you to be sure to take a look at your West Shore Weekly. So many ways of connecting with people, finding friendships, deepening friendships, learning all sorts of things that expand you, mind, heart, spirit. I want to point out just a couple things here in your West Shore Weekly. Today after the sermon chat at noon in the chapel. We'll continue the conversation about this controversial topic that we'll be exploring today. Now on the right-hand side, the right-hand column, you see lots of particular things that we're doing. We're busy 24/7, well not 24/7, but we're busy all week long. And I wanted to point out Thursday at 6:30, it's a drop-in connection circle, and I lead that. That's for people who are interested in our Connection Circle ministry. And basically what that is joining a group of folks, around 5 to 10 people, where you basically experience life together. You go into, you explore certain topics, you build deep relationships in that context. I want you to invite you, if you've never been a part of a Connection Circle or you've heard about it, you're curious about it, come on this Thursday at 6:30 and have an experience and see what it's like and where that might take you. If you flip the page, Look at the bottom of the section that says Connecting. Sojourner Truth, Sunday, February 18th, 1 p.m. West Shore excited to bring Sojourner Truth to tell her vivid and anguishing story of slavery, abolitionism, and activism during our celebration of Black History Month. Check that out. That will be amazing. Hope to see you there. Hope to see you at all these various events that are coming up here at West Shore. Now, let me ask, if you are here for the first or second time and you do not mind the others of us knowing that, raise your hand. Oh, whoa. Oh, yay, thank you so much. Yeah, good. We're glad you're here this morning, and for whoever else is joining us today. Well, the children and youth will go on to their classes while the rest of us will greet each other warmly, and the greeting time will end with the sound of the bowl. So let's greet each other right now. We come to this good morning, remembering the journey of freedom. The land we are on was once another's. We mourn the legacies of oppression. Healing is our way forward. Joy is the birthright of all.
Generosity is one of our spiritual disciplines as Unitarian Universalists, and it's part of our worship every week to practice it. Some Sundays we take an offering on behalf of a nonprofit organization doing good work in the world. And then on other Sundays, we remember how one of those nonprofits doing great work in the world is us. So today's offering goes to our own congregation and our many ministries of spiritual growth, caring, service, and action in the wider community. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
So December 16th, 2017. That is a date that is probably unmemorable for most, completely unlike 9/11 or Pearl Harbor. Yet that day saw a historic rebirth in people's interest in UFOs. On December 16th, 2017, certain military radar videos were leaked to the public, which purported to show recent encounters with Navy jets with unusually shaped, unusually fast-moving aircraft. The New York Times picked up this story and put it out there for all the world to see, including 2 of these videos. Here's one of them.
Hey, there's a on, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. The whole thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like another thing, it's rotating.
What you're seeing is a bajillion-dollar weapons-grade infrared radar system at work. In other words, it's not the sort of system that's going to confuse a bird for a plane. That's not a bird. That's a something, a UFO. Now, it was a little difficult to hear the audio, but if you were able to hear them, you would have heard the pilot say that this something is flying against the wind, which is 120 knots. 120 knots is equivalent to 138 miles an hour, which is the wind speed of a Category 4 hurricane. These things would be out there all day, said Lieutenant Ryan Graves, an FA-18 Super Hornet pilot who reported his sightings from 2015 to the Pentagon and Congress. He told them, keeping an aircraft in the air requires a significant amount of energy. With the speeds we observed, 12 hours in the air is 11 hours longer than we would expect. These are the days indeed of a true UFO renaissance. Did you know that? You were living in that time? Even the language of UFOs has been recently revised to signal the start of a completely new chapter. They've been revised from UFO to unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, to signal this new start. On May 17th, 2022, we saw the first public congressional hearing into UFO sightings in over 50 years. And maybe this is because the year right before that, in 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence published a much-anticipated report entitled Preliminary Assessment, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. It presented 144 events involving UFOs collected from United States government and military sources from 2004 to 2021. And this new report concluded that only one of these 144 events and encounters reported in the past 17 years, only one could be explained. Only one. Explained, that is, as normal, non-mysterious sorts of things, not as things which are honest to God, honest to Buddha, honest to Krishna, mysteries from some other world. But if so, what other world could we be talking about? I wonder what you might be thinking about all of this, what you may be bringing to today's topic of UFOs. Are your shields up? Or perhaps there is some curiosity balanced with deep caution. Might there even be some openness to hearing something new? I am very aware that we are not just any kind of community. We are a Unitarian Universalist community, and so to personalize this strange topic even further, I want to highlight the specific experience of two Unitarian Universalists, Betty and Barney Hill. On the night and early morning of September 19th and 20th of 1961, Betty and Barney reported an otherworldly experience of being abducted by aliens. This incident would become the first story of alien abduction to receive nationwide attention. It is one of the most thoroughly researched stories. It is of extraordinary importance and is a first in many ways. And if it could happen to those Unitarian Universalists, well, what about the rest of us? Part 2 of this 3-part sermon series will focus on the details of the Betty and Barney experience. For the rest of this first part, we're going to take a brief tour of the standard cultural conversation about UFOs before 1961, leading right up to Betty and Barney's time. And as for part 3 of today's sermon, there I am going to offer up some conclusions as well as a perspective that you might consider to be quite different from the usual. So I'm going to ask you to hang in there with me, and let's see if you leave church today with some ideas you might not have considered before. You going to hang in there with me? Okay, oh my geez, come on. Don't bust a gut on me now. Okay, great. Here we go. So, UFOs before 1961. I want us to go back 400 years to 1561, although we could go back much farther, and we could go to all 7 continents on our planet. 400 years ago in 1561, we have a woodcut by Hans Glaser portraying mysterious phenomena in the sky over Nuremberg, Germany. Fast forward 317 years and cross the ocean to North America. In 1878, we see an article in the Denison, Texas Daily News from 1878. It's entitled, "A Strange Phenomenon." Tells the story of a remarkable thing one Mr. John Martin saw in the sky. I quote him. He says, "The particular shape and the seeming velocity with which the object seemed to approach," and on and on. 39 years later, we go back across the ocean and land in Portugal, at Fatima, Portugal. In 1917, something happened that has since been called the miracle of the sun. Wikipedia tells this part of the story. It says, newspapers published testimony from witnesses who said that they had seen an extraordinary solar activity, such as the sun appearing to dance and to zigzag in the sky, careening towards the earth to emit multicolored light, to emit radiant energy. According to these reports, the event lasted approximately 10 minutes. 30,000 people experienced this UFO. There is, in short, nothing new. There is, in short, nothing new about all of this, about strange objects in the sky. And it is also important to see that the cultural conversation about UFOs before the time of the Betty and Barney Hill incident wouldn't stay at the level of the purportedly factual. Fiction has been a huge part of the cultural conversation too. Fiction, an important venue for exploring questions about UFOs, like this question: are they friend or are they foe? 1938's famous War of the Worlds radio play, right? Shocked Americans. People thought that it was really happening, that aliens from Mars were coming to take over the Earth. Do you remember that? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. One aspect of the cultural conversation around UFOs then has been people trying to communicate what they take to be fact side by side with creative types engaged in fictional explorations of what UFOs might mean. Fact, the very common World War II observation coming from Axis and Allied pilots of strange lights following their aircraft. These strange lights were eventually named Foo Fighters. This is where the band got that name from. Foo Fighters. Please, Foo Fighters. Fact. On June 24th, 1947, came a truly watershed event. A civilian pilot named Kenneth Arnold described seeing, and I quote him, a group of bat-like aircraft flying in formation at high speeds near Mount Rainier in Washington State. He said that they were, and I quote again, moving like a saucer would if skipped across the water. Okay? 1 week after this news story went out, a Gallup poll asked Americans if they knew about UFOs. 90% of Americans had already heard the term. The issue of UFOs had traveled like wildfire. Right? Here's an artist's rendition of what Arnold saw. Now, note very carefully that Arnold described what he saw as a group of bats, right? Bat-like aircraft flying in formation at high speeds. He did not see any round, saucer-like objects. He didn't see that. But he also said that they were moving like a saucer would move if skipped across the water. If reporters had been more careful, today we might know UFOs as unidentified flying bats. Or unidentified flying blades. But a reporter misquoted Arnold and emphasized the round saucer image, and ever after, we have been talking about flying saucers. Did you know that? That the language of flying saucers reflects a mistake? I've been quoted by reporters before, and wow, lots of mistakes. But you know what? It caught on. The image of flying saucer, it caught on. Fact. Less than a month after the Kenneth Arnold sighting, on July 6th, 1947, the Roswell incident happened. The story was that a UFO crashed and UFO hardware, together with dead alien occupants, had been recovered by the military. 3 days later, the Army debunked that it had actually happened. They debunked it. It was just an air balloon that had crashed. Nothing to see here, folks. Not fact, but fiction. And you know what? Americans at the time mostly believed the Army. And it was very reasonably so, when hoaxes at the time were extremely common. Here's a story from just a few days after the whole Roswell incident, July 12th, 1947, at Twin Falls, Idaho. Teenagers had fabricated a UFO from the parts of a jukebox. And you know what? They got into trouble with no less than the FBI, the Army, and the police. And I'll bet their parents grounded them for a long, long time. All of this brings up yet another aspect of the UFO cultural conversation. Is the purported UFO story a hoax, or is it something that really happened? And if the thing really happened, will the authorities allow the truth to be known, or will it become an X-file? Everybody go with me. Ooh. Yeah. With all the aggressive denial and debunking, will all of that just be a cover for people in power not wanting the world to know? Meanwhile, the is it friend or is it foe theme in fiction continue to play on. In 1951's The Day the Earth Stood Still, an alien lands in Washington, D.C., tells the people of the earth that they must live peacefully or be destroyed as a danger to other planets. I would call this tough love. Okay? Aliens as friendly, but also holding earthlings accountable. By 1959, fictional takes on UFOs were getting extravagant. Here's an interesting take on aliens are our enemies. and you can go to my blog site and see all the pictures and stuff. You got to check this one out. They blast the flesh off humans. Oh, it's just hilarious. You got to, teenagers, right? I had a teenager. I thought she was an alien. Just kidding. Sorry. By 1961, the idea of UFOs and aliens had so thoroughly permeated American life that Disneyland, on August 6th, 1961, opened up a new ride to the public, a flying saucer ride. It was only 1 month after this, on September 19th, 1961, what the world has come to know as the Betty and Barney Hill alien abduction happened. Here they are, Betty and Barney Hill. They are an interracial couple, which of course brought them plenty of challenges, as you can imagine. Betty and Barney were very active members of their Portsmouth, New Hampshire Unitarian Universalist Church. They were social justice activists. They were religious educators. I think Barney served as an usher for many years as well. They were upstanding citizens in their New Hampshire community. They were middle class. They were well respected. Until the event, they didn't believe in any such nonsense as UFOs. They thought science fiction was foolish. They didn't go see any of those shows or read any of those books. They stayed away from that stuff. They just were not the alien abduction types. They weren't. But you know, as the saying goes, humans plan and God laughs. Humans plan and God laughs. Here is something that Barney drew after the event, some of what he saw. He drew that. Was the incident real? Was it fictional? Aliens as friendly? Aliens as foes? Would the story of Betty and Barney Hill be honored? Or would the authorities try to debunk it no matter how solid the evidence? Stay with me for part 2.
So appropriate. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going?
The true story of Betty and Barney Hill.
But was it true?
What?
The Betty and Barney Hill story. I know they were good Unitarian Universalists, but maybe they were confused about what happened. I mean, some say that Barney was a highly suggestible person, and Betty's frightening dreams must have impressed themselves upon him. The amazing Randy said that all they experienced was a plasma phenomenon related to ball lightning. Yet a third debunker said that both Betty and Barney were influenced by all the movies and TV shows about UFOs of the time. Definitely a concern for me has to do with the fact that hypnosis was a major factor enabling Betty and Barney to tell the full story about what happened. But what if the hypnotist planted the so-called memories in them?
Whoa!
See, when you put sermon topics out there, I'm allowed to read about them.
You get an A+, Scott. You get an A+ for that extra research there, research ahead of time. Although I want us to back up a bit, if we could. Let's tell the basics of this story, including some of the truly tantalizing parts that maybe aren't so easily dismissed. Sound okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, here's the story that Betty and Barney shared with Major Henderson of the Air Force's Project Blue Book, the official story. On the night of 1920 September 1961, the observers were traveling by car in a southerly direction on Route 3 south of Lincoln, New Hampshire, when they noticed a brightly lighted object ahead of their car at an angle and elevation of approximately 45 degrees. It appeared strange to them because of its shape and the intensity of its lights compared to the stars in the sky. Weather and sky were clear. They continued to observe the moving object from their moving car for a few minutes, then stopped. After stopping the car, they used binoculars at times. They report that the object was traveling north very fast. They report it changed directions rather abruptly and then headed south. Shortly thereafter, it stopped and hovered in the air. There was no sound evident up to this time. Both observers used the binoculars at this point. While hovering, objects began to appear from the body of the object, which they described as looking like wings, which made a V shape when extended. The wings had red lights on the tips. At this point, they observed it to appear to swoop down in the general direction of their auto. The object continued to descend until it appeared to be only a matter of hundreds of feet above their car. At this point, they decided to get out of the area, and fast. Mr. Hill was driving, and Mrs. Hill watched the object by sticking her head out the window. It departed in a generally northwesterly direction, but Mrs. Hill was prevented from observing its full departure by her position in the car. They report that while the object was above them after it had swooped down, they heard a series of short, loud buzzes, which they described as sounding like someone had dropped a tuning fork. They report that they could feel these buzzing sounds in their auto. No further visual observation was made of the object. They continued on their trip, and when they arrived in the vicinity of Ashland, New Hampshire, about 30 miles from Lincoln, they again heard the buzzing sound of the object. However, they did not see it at this time. Mrs. Hill reported the flight pattern of the object to be erratic. It changed directions rapidly, and during its flight, it ascended and descended numerous times very rapidly. Its flight was described as jerky and not smooth. Mr. Hill is a civil service employee in the Boston Post Office and doesn't possess any technical or scientific training. Neither does his wife. During a later conversation with Mr. Hill, he volunteered the observation that he did not originally intend to report the incident, but inasmuch as he and his wife did in fact see this occurrence, he decided to report it. He says that on looking back, he feels that the whole thing is incredible, and he feels somewhat foolish. He just cannot believe that such a thing could or did happen. He says, on the other hand, that they both saw what they reported, and this fact gives it some degree of reality.
So this was the report that Major Henderson submitted to the Air Force. That's it. Do you know what the Air Force's ultimate conclusion was about what happened?
Yeah, the Air Force said that Betty and Barney probably just saw Jupiter.
That's just incredible. Sounds like the Air Force wasn't even trying. I mean, look at this. It's only an artist's rendition of one moment of the encounter, but at least it's faithful to the story. That doesn't look like anything like Jupiter. Ugh. You know, Betty kept a daily journal, and here's what she described here's what she wrote about when they happened to get home. She says, "We entered our home, turned on the lights, and went over to the window and looked skyward. We stood there together for several minutes. Then Barney said, 'This is the most amazing thing that has ever happened to me.' We both wondered if they were going to come back." Betty also reported Barney's comment that their arrival time, shortly after 5 a.m., was later than expected. She says, "We felt very calm, peaceful, relaxed. We sat at the kitchen table. We just looked at each other. We shook our heads and what happened? We agreed that it was unbelievable, but it had really happened. We would return to the window, and we would just look skyward." Next morning, when Betty and Barney woke up, Barney suggested that they should go into separate rooms and draw the object that they both observed to see if they came up with similar pictures. And the pictures were indeed remarkably alike. Both knew that something extraordinary had happened. Both were perplexed that they had lost around 2 hours of time, but they disagreed on what to do next. Barney said that, quote, "they should refrain from telling anyone," anticipating that because their experience was so fantastic, they would never be believed. Betty, though, was a strong-willed, independent woman. She promptly disagreed. Betty called her sister the very next day to tell her what happened. And next, her sister reached out to a friend who happened to be a physicist who told Betty she should go to the car and test it with a compass. Remember the buzzing sensation that they had in the car, the buzzing sensation? Well, Barney didn't want to. He wanted to forget what happened. But Betty persisted. This is what she said about it in her diary. "I walked around my car, not knowing what I was looking for. When I came to the trunk area, I saw many highly polished spots, each about the size of a $50 or a silver dollar. I placed the compass over them, and it started to spin and spin and spin. And as I was watching this, I was filled with an unexplained feeling of absolute terror."
There were other physical clues that something truly strange had happened. Betty's new dress was torn, had weird stains on it, and her zipper was broken. The tops of Barney's good dress shoes were badly scraped. Both their watches had stopped at the time of the event, and later on could not be restarted. Even creepier is a fact learned much later on, that the Air Force had had a radar report from the same night, and radar contact had been established with an airborne object in the same area that Betty and Barney Hill had been in.
You know, one of the things that really stands out for me is how differently Betty and Barney approached what had happened. Betty wanted to investigate. Barney did acknowledge that something truly mysterious had happened, but he did not want to become known publicly as a weirdo. He did not want that. Both of them were social justice activists at their Unitarian Universalist church, but Barney was a major community leader in civil rights, and he didn't want his public credibility destroyed. Neither of them wanted to go full on public with their experience, neither of them. But Betty simply could not be at peace with herself if she didn't try to understand more deeply what the heck had just happened. And Barney, despite his ambivalence, he valued science and he valued national security, and he felt a citizen's obligation to do what he could do to help. And there were other pressures at play. Betty started having terrible nightmares. Barney was increasingly struggling with ulcers, and nothing that the doctors were doing were working. Barney also felt like he had developed a mental block and suspected that there was more to the story he was not allowing himself to know For physical and psychological reasons both, they decided to pursue hypnotherapy, which they'd heard could be extremely effective. Enter Dr. Benjamin Simon, a widely respected hypnotherapist.
And that's when the rest of the story emerged, the part of the story that didn't come out for Major Henderson of the Air Force. It turned out that Betty and Barney's contact with the UFOs had been of the third kind, direct contact. The tops of Barney's dress shoes were scraped because he'd been dragged inside the spaceship. Betty's dress was torn and the zipper broken because the aliens apparently didn't know how dresses worked, and they were wanting to remove it in order to conduct a physical examination, something on the order of amniocentesis, a procedure which would have been mainly unknown to Americans until the late 1960s. The aliens conducted a physical examination on Barney, and they were surprised to discover that Barney had false teeth that could be removed. Betty says they got so worked up about this, she had to calm them down. Betty even remembered having a conversation with the aliens about aging, and the topic was greatly confusing to them. Aging? What is aging?
It all came out in the hypnosis sessions facilitated by Dr. Benjamin Simon. Using today's language, we would say that Betty and Barney had suffered dissociative amnesia from the trauma that they had experienced, and the hypnosis had created a safe space, safe enough for these split-off, threatening memories to be retrieved. Now, Scott, I remember you sharing a moment ago your concern about the idea that Dr. Simon might have planted these memories in them, these strange ideas. Am I remembering that right?
You are.
I was very surprised to find out that Dr. Simon was indeed trying to plant ideas into the heads of Betty and Barney. But the idea that he was trying to plant into their heads was that it was all just a dream, that it had not happened, in fact, at all.
What?
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's really weird. I keep on using that word, weird.
And they never did want to go full-on public with their story. Other people who claimed to be contactees regularly did just that, so as to make money or to feel important. Classic case, a guy named George Adamansky in the 1950s, but that wasn't Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah, the story got out against their will. Against their will. So-called friends had betrayed them. They spilled the story to this journalist guy, John H. Luttrell Jr., or Sr. rather, who published an article in the Boston Traveler on October 25th, 1965. That's almost 4 years after the thing happened, okay? The article was entitled, UFO Chiller, Did They Seize Couple? They, of course, meaning the aliens. Betty and Barney were devastated. They just felt that they had no choice now than to go full-on public in order to correct the multiple accuracies in the article and to save their reputations. And this is how the authorized version of the story was told to the world through John Fuller's The Interrupted Journey, published in 1966. So, this retelling of the Betty and Barney Hill story, it's started with you expressing some real concerns. Did what happened happen? Was it true? Well, what do you think now?
So, Reverend Anthony, it is really hard to take UFO stories and alien abduction stories at face value. You are a UU minister, which means you're pretty good at helping people to understand old stories in new ways. Have you got a different angle for us to consider?
Stick with me for part 3. The Betty and Barney Hill incident happened all of 63 years ago. And the path to it, all the way from now back to then, it can't possibly be straight. I mean, just look at some of the things that have happened with the UFO cultural conversation since 1961. Just some of what's happened on the UFO cultural scene since the Betty and Barney Hill abduction 63 years ago. And of those conversational themes I outlined in part 1 of this sermon, they're still present. We continue to see attempts to explore UFOs factually, side by side with fictional explorations. We continue to see people putting their stories out there, presumably in good faith, accompanied with suspicions about conspiracies and government cover-ups. Are aliens friends or are they foes? Do they exist or not? What the heck is going on? And I cannot possibly promise you conclusions here that tie everything up into a neat bow. That's far beyond my pay grade, okay? We are eyeballs deep in a genuine, honest-to-God, capital M mystery. As in, mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Yeah, mystery, mystery. But what I want to leave you with here is perhaps an expansion in your sense of what we might be dealing with. Did you know that in ufology, there is an old school and a new school? Did you know that? Okay. Old school is the theory that UFOs and their alien pilots, if real, are visitors from planets light years away. They are physical beings like us, but incredibly advanced technologically. Call this the astrobiological. Say that with me, astrobiological. It's the astrobiological interpretation of UFO phenomena. This is the interpretation that dominates the popular imagination. It is pretty much all that you find in fictional movies and stories and so on. It is pretty much what is in the back of folks' minds when they think about UFOs. It is probably what is in the back of your mind as you've been processing this stuff that I have been putting out there to you. However, some ufologists found themselves questioning the astrobiological interpretation in light of the typical extreme strangeness of encounters with these UFOs. Alien behavior seemed inconsistent with what you would expect from space visitors, especially given the time and effort it would take, presumably, to travel light-year distances. Okay? In fictional movies, aliens act with reason. They act with purpose, whether it is to befriend humanity or to terrorize it. But from real-life stories, say from 1947 and Kenneth Arnold's fateful sighting of unidentified flying bats, which kicked off the modern UFO craze, what we have learned is this. From all this time, what we have learned is this. Number one, UFOs blow the minds of scattered individuals while seeming to do everything they can to prevent a collective confidence that they actually exist. You got that? Second, if UFOs are trying to change human society, it is completely under the radar. UFOs are not following standard fictional scripts, rational scripts of either befriending humanity or trying to destroy it. What are they doing? Third, you would think, being the presumably super advanced creatures that they are, that after 75 years or more of contact with humans, they would not need to do any more physical exams to know how human bodies work. But the physical examinations continue. And so on. It just seems inconsistent with the astrobiological interpretation. Thus, the new school. And it is represented by such luminaries in the field as J. Allen Hynek, who was the person who coined, encounters of the third kind, right? And also Jacques Vallée. I want you to call this the paranormal interpretation. Say that with me. Paranormal, okay? By the mid-1960s, Vallée and Hynek had seen enough data to start questioning the astrobiological interpretation. But they were also starting to acquaint themselves with the long history of human encounters with mythic entities like fairies and angels. They started to do their homework on the universal and perennial phenomena of visionary experience, mystical experience. It's somewhat analogous to the direction that mythologist Joseph Campbell took in his study of the ancient Greek hero myths. Joseph Campbell started to look beyond Greece to other traditions which told stories that on the surface, right, looked very different, but at bottom echoed all the same basic themes. His very famous book, Hero with a Thousand Faces, has since changed our way of thinking about the hero myth. Similarly, Hynek and Vallée, they started to look beyond the traditional UFO stories to all stories that embodied the basic theme of human encounters with transpersonal beings, strange beings. From this paranormal interpretation perspective, what you get is this. You get a picture of human reality that is multidimensional. There is a larger intelligence that we all exist within, and our three-dimensional lives are enfolded in that multidimensional intelligence. Spiritual entities, which are of this larger intelligence, have always been poking themselves into our flesh and blood lives. And different people in different historical times will have interpreted these encounters differently. Some will say that they've experienced angels. Others will say that they've experienced fairies. Since phenomena in the skies have always fascinated humanity, it is no surprise that we always have had stories of strange objects coming from above. But now, given how thoroughly our culture is saturated in technological development, people today are more likely to describe their encounters with transpersonal beings in science fiction terms. Alien entities from different planets, light years away, who have big almond eyes, and they fly in saucer-like spacecraft, and they abduct people to do medical experiments on them, and so on. Angels, fairies, aliens. They look really different, but at bottom it is an encounter with the same basic mystery, which is not so much supernatural as simply way beyond our current understanding of what natural is. This paranormal interpretation of UFOs, it can be really tough to wrap your head around it when you first encounter it. And I really want folks to appreciate this new school of thought. So I want us to take an extra moment to absorb it, starting with a description of a typical experience of a UFO abduction. You'll hear lots of echoes with the Betty and Barney Hill experience that we just heard a moment ago in part 2. Here it goes. Number 1, at night, in a remote area or at home, a witness sees a UFO and tries to flee. He enters into a zone, or she enters, or they enters into a zone of strangeness As surroundings lose normal appearance, machines misbehave, the person's volition is impaired, their memory blanks out, strange humanoid beings appear and float or carry them inside a UFO. Number 3, he enters a uniformly lighted operating room where one or more alien beings subject him to a medical examination, sometimes of a painful character. Number 4, afterwards he may see long tunnels or other parts of the ship, or travel a great distance in a short time to a dark and desolate other planet, then to a light and airy realm, both of which have buildings. And among the aliens, they may actually see a human being and receive messages. And 5, on returning to Earth, he finds a memory gap and finds injuries on his body and may receive later visits and extra-normal manifestations. Okay, so that's standard, that's classic, okay? Now I want you to take this and I want you to superimpose it on the experience of folks who say that they have encountered fairies. And fairies are creatures of Persian and European folklore, which people have been telling stories about for 1,000 years or more. Listen to this story. Number 1, at night in a remote area or in the vicinity of a fairy mound, the witness, number 2, finds his surroundings unfamiliar as he encounters mist or is led astray. He loses his willpower as he hears enchanting music. He encounters one or more unusual beings who invite or lure him away to go with them. And afoot, by kind of some unusual ride or conveyance, he passes through a dark tunnel. He takes a ride in darkness or sails on a stormy voyage to some otherworldly place, some other world inside a mound or maybe across the sea. Number 3, he enters a dimly or indirectly lighted hall or room or otherworldly country and joins a society of beings who feasts, dances, there's games, there's pleasures. Or he may assist a woman in childbirth, which is often painful. While there, he may see a captive human and acquire extra-normal powers of knowledge. And then number 5, he becomes a captive, or he returns after a supernormal lapse of time, which causes him to turn to dust, or he receives later punishment for powers granted in fairyland. So on the one hand, you got the UFO abduction from current times. On the other hand, you've got the fairy abduction experience from ancient times. Are these two fundamentally different experiences? The paranormal interpretation says no. Culture and historical conditioning aside, it says that both stories are about a human encounter with some transpersonal spiritual beings, and it is highly strange. It is highly strange. It can also be argued that these transpersonal spiritual beings are very much aware of people's cultural conditioning, and they are actively shaping how they appear accordingly. I want you to remember again what I said earlier about Kenneth Arnold, how Kenneth Arnold talked about what he saw in 1947. He saw a group of bat-like aircraft flying in formation at high speeds. They were moving like a saucer would move if skipped across water. Well, because of the reporter's mistake, the news spoke of flying saucers, and that image caught the imagination of folks worldwide. But what is most curious about this, in the wake of this, is how UFO phenomena increasingly took the form of flat and round objects, flying saucers. It was as if the phenomena reshaped itself to conform to what people were expecting to see. Are you getting the high strangeness of this? It's so strange the planets are falling off the sky. And then there's this one particular piece, it just makes my hair stand on end. It just brings chills up and down my spine. Remember what Betty said when she was talking about the aliens in their encounter, how the aliens did not understand what aging was? Do you remember that? When Scott told that part of the story. Their response was, aging? What is aging? But how could a biological being not know what aging is? How could a being from a three-dimensional world of time and death not know this? But the aliens Betty and Barney encountered honestly did not know. From this comes the natural suggestion they must be something that is indeed more like an angel or a fairy or some creature of mythology whose stories we have been telling from time immemorial. Some folks are going to be old school when they try to understand what happened to Betty and Barney Hill, when they try to understand what the heck is going on with this UFO phenomena. Personally, I think the new school is onto something interesting. And I want to ask each of you here in this worship space today, I want to ask you this question. I want to ask you it seriously and sincerely. What if? What if this new school is really onto something? That encounters with highly strange transpersonal beings, which we today call UFOs, other times have called them different things. What if it's true? What if we have been encountering these things for all of human history? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. You know, the distinctively Unitarian Universalist question, at least as I see it in all of this, is how do we bring reason to the mystery? Not to impatiently debunk something which on the surface seems crazy, but to get beyond and underneath appearances and appreciate more deeply and soulfully our understanding of the human. Something is about the human condition here, because we have always had these experiences, these strange experiences. These things are not so simply dismissed. You know, in The Color Purple, Alice Walker, the beautiful book, Alice Walker has the character Celie say, "I think us here to wonder, myself, to wonder, to ask. And in that wondering about the big things and asking about the big things, you learn about the little ones, almost by accident. But you never know nothing about the big things than when you start out with. The more I wonder, the more I love." And then there is something that the Irish poet and believer in fairies, William Butler Yeats, said, "The world is full of magic things, patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper. More love, more magic." May it all be so. Let's say our extinguishing the chalice words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again. Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never a harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the light of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, ever harbor or port have I known. Wide in you is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. So there's that line here in this Blue Boat Home song, leaning over the edge in what, did you feel that way today? Leaning over the edge, but I hope it was with wonder and with courage. Blue Boat Home is all about what it means to be Unitarian Universalist, to have the courage to pursue questions which at times may be complex and at times really strange. I wish that courage for you today. This world is full of wonder, so may you enter into it more deeply as a Unitarian Universalist ought to. Blue Boat Home, folks. Thank you. Please be seated.